and welcome back to another edition of the Slumber Party podcast. My name is Amanda Jewson. I'm here today with my co-host, Liza Ramrine. Hi, Liza.
Hi.
It took us approximately 23 minutes to get the lighting in my new office right. I was actually thinking the last episode we talked about, I was manifesting that I wouldn't record another podcast in my basement. And here we are. I mean, there's some
Growing
reasons.
pains. That's okay.
Yeah, we're getting there. I am in my new office. I don't have my fancy wallpaper yet. For those viewers at home, you can see some pillows on the floor though, because I'm trying to pad out the noise in this room. I don't know if it's working, but anyway.
Mike is doing his job.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I read if you want good sound, get a really good mic, and I think I do have a good mic, so I think I'm okay. Today, I am just looking at the question. Today, we are going to talk about something that a follower had sent in to us that I think is such a common thing and a common refrain. It's the refrain, drowsy but awake. Liza, think back to all 100 years ago when you were a new parent. Mm-hmm. How many times did you hear the refrain, drowsy but awake?
I probably didn't. Like I said, I wasn't social media wasn't a thing. I didn't do a lot of reading about sleep. Like I am, you know me, I just do things by my gut, it's how I'm feeling that day. But I think my husband and I were always very aware that we didn't want to constantly be holding our son. We did actually want to have him in our arms all the time, just to teach him that it's okay to be by himself. And our first one, was the poster child for putting down drowsy.
Same.
And we actually even have cute videos and pictures of him just dozing off so peacefully beside us. So yes, I didn't hear the term, which may be stepping on the point here a little bit.
That's okay. That's good knowledge too.
But I think that we just we didn't want to constantly be rocking him to sleep or whatever. So we did used to put him down in his little bassinet when we'd be watching TV and just give him a little bit of autonomy, a little bit of alone time, but beside us.
Totally. Yeah. So I kind of love that because I think so.
I have to interrupt you actually a couple of times. I think every parent has experienced this where you're trying to eat your dinner and you're holding your baby and then a spaghetti falls on his head.
Yes.
And then so after that, we're let's put our child down a little more. Maybe take a break for our dinner so that a piece of carbonara.
Well, at least it was spaghetti. And it wasn't a hot piece of so actually one time I had some leftover chicken from the night before and I popped it in the microwave and there was this kind of fatty oily bit on the side and my youngest, being who she is, was give me that. So she reached out and she burnt her little finger and it was so sad and I felt so bad. But at least it wasn't something like that. So we had an anonymous message. Did I already share the message? No. I don't think I read it word for word.
You read it.
Or did I? I did. The drowsy but awake setting? Okay. Look, I'm having a moment. I totally forgot even the name of where we recorded this podcast today. I've got a lot on my mind. But we did have an anonymous question say, what should I do if my now 6.5-month-old baby didn't come with the drowsy but awake setting? And I love this because the drowsy but awake thing is something that's told to parents all the time about how to teach their baby independent sleep skills. And doctors will say it, put your baby drowsy but awake, put your baby down drowsy but awake. And the idea is that if they go down a little bit drowsy or sleepy, they will figure out part two, to falling asleep independently. The more you do it, the easier it will be for your child to fall asleep. And a lot of parents are frustrated by this advice. So when I had my kids were pretty good to put down drowsy but awake. That is what I did when they were newborns, and they were great sleepers. And that is actually super great advice if you have a baby under 3.5 months old. You should start putting them down independently, drowsy but awake, as often as you can. Just simply to get used to that behavior, if that's something that you want. So I don't hate drowsy but awake. What I hate about drowsy but awake is that it does have a shelf life that not a lot of people talk about. So what I mean by that is, like, let's say you go in and you see your doctor, and your doctor asks you how your baby is sleeping, and then you tell them, and they're like, oh, well, just put the baby down drowsy but awake. And that seems really easy. Like, obviously, great advice. Thank you. But the reality of that is, not all babies, if you are putting them down drowsy, okay, let's talk about what drowsy is. If you are drowsy, so, Lisa, I don't know, do you fall asleep on the couch a lot?
No.
No, same. I'm not that person. A lot of people, a lot of my clients will say that they do. Or, when people like watch Netflix and they're like, yeah, then I fall asleep immediately. Like, that's not me. But, my husband does this a lot, where he will come into bed and immediately put his head down, and he's like, and I'm like, I'm not asleep yet. He's like making sounds, and I'm like, hey, stop. Or can you move on to your side? And he's like, I'm not even sleeping. He'll say that to me, those
Yeah.
exact words. So, and this is like a funny thing, because this has been going on in our relationship from the very beginning. And when I learned about sleep, when I became a sleep consultant, and I learned about the stages of sleep, I was like, oh my God, that is my husband. So it's like or let's say you've just dozed off or something, and then your kid walks into the room, or if you had like a micro nap and you're like, oh, damn, I didn't even sleep. You are actually probably in a state of sleep that you didn't remember. A great example as well that I like to give clients, so they know that this is a thing for them, is, do you fall asleep during massages? I do.
No.
Oh
I
my
fall
gosh.
asleep in my bed.
Good for you. That's exactly the way it should be. But I fall asleep during massages, or you can get into like a zone that you're like, I'm awake. I'm awake. Like, you're kind of like half there, but you're in a different state. And that is where your baby is when they are in drowsy. Okay. The idea of drowsy but awake. So to you, their eyes are open, they're blinking, they're not like slow blinking, or like they're like awake, living their life. So to the parent, you're like, yeah, you're awake. I put my baby down awake. Okay. But if they're like slow blinking, or like, parents will often say, I just sit with them until they are calm, or I do this thing until they are XYZ, then that is probably getting them to drowsy. Now, this is a very roundabout way of talking about this thing. But what is drowsy? Drowsy is stage 1 of sleep. It is sleep. So when you're on your couch and your eyes are kind of like opening and shutting, you're sleeping. This is why when people are driving on the highway tired, this is why people say pull over, because you're sleeping. Okay. You're not helping anyone, because you were legitimately, if we put you in a sleep study thing and they monitored you, you would be headed into stage 1 of sleep.
Okay, so the car thing has happened to me.
Okay. Oh, where we have an
Which is
identification
very
moment.
scary. That is like extremely, extremely scary. Yeah.
It happens to so many people, which is why
Yeah.
it's really not recommended to drive tired, because if you are drowsy, you are sleeping. And that's why when people are like, no, I thought I was awake, and then I opened my eyes and I was off the road, right?
Yeah.
That's what happens. So when we think about babies going down drowsy but awake, again, I don't hate this method. I think this is a great thing. But after 3.5 months old, just like any assistance to sleep, boobs, bottles, padding, shushing, co-sleeping, whatever it is you're doing to get your baby to sleep, if you have to do that thing to get them to drowsy, it's not drowsy but awake. It is assisted sleep. So
Mhm.
now we've told all of these parents drowsy but awake, drowsy but awake, drowsy but awake, and they're doing drowsy but awake, but they don't know that they're helping. And the people giving this advice are well meaning. They're not being like, ha ha ha. Because, obviously, like everything, every individual child out there and every individual child that we work with is an individual, right? So that can work. It can work. But if you are continuing to do drowsy but awake and you have several wakings, then I would say you're assisting. Does that make sense? Is that landing with you, Lisa?
No, yeah, it totally makes sense. Yeah.
So,
Um,
yeah, go ahead.
no, I'm just trying. No, I didn't have a complete thought.
No, you did have a complete thought. I know you did. No, I think it's one of those things. So when I go to this question and this follower says, "What is wrong with my baby?" And her drowsy and awake thing, there's nothing wrong with your baby. What's
Mhm.
wrong is the concept of drowsy but awake after a certain age. If you are still trying to get your baby to sleep, now I'm not saying don't try it, but if you've tried that for a month and your baby is older than 3.5 months, you probably have a sleep association. Anything that you have to do to get them to drowsy is the sleep association. So then we have to go back. So when we're doing our sleep plans with our clients, I'm going over my consultation and I'm literally saying like it's not drowsy but awake. It is awake, 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 awake.
Mhm.
And they're like, "Oh, okay." So it has to be that direct with clients that it's awake, awake. It's not drowsy but awake.
Mhm. Yeah.
Now, the next question that I get all over my TikTok is, well, then they will cry. And then that's when you have to hire us because that's what we do. We're going to help you with that. So I'm just surprised no one ever told you drowsy but awake. I feel like that was the
I
very
don't know
first
when it
piece of
came into
advice.
my consciousness. Like, I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know at which point I learned for sure. Obviously, I know that term now, right?
Yeah.
Especially like just being around you and all that. So, but for sure, it wasn't like a concept that we specifically discussed, like, like
Yeah.
in those terms. I think our idea was just that we don't want our child to only be dependent on being able to fall asleep while
Yeah.
nursing,
Yeah.
or like when it's dark or nighttime. Like, we wanted to give
Mhm.
him. And also I think that, to make your point as well, some kids are just like not like my middle son. He is extremely receptive to cuddles. Like, he was
Mhm.
always the cuddly one. Like, my oldest son,
Mhm.
even as an infant, we remember, like, he actually, maybe we did think of this concept because he seemed almost agitated when we would
Mhm.
hold him for too long, like he
Mhm.
did need that downtime from us. Like,
Yeah.
and I think that, just having noise around, or like living our lives still around him, was helpful. Like, we just check in on him,
Yeah.
like, we lived in a small apartment, so it was easy to always be by him, but we just like look over and he'd just be asleep, and even to this day, like, he doesn't like sleeping with other people. He doesn't like
Mhm.
um cuddling or like hugging
Mhm.
for too long,
Mhm.
and it's just who he was, so sort of
I
like
kind
what
of
you're
love that
saying.
you're saying that. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you. What were you saying?
No, I'm just saying, like, it also, it could be dependent on personality. He was that way from birth, and even when we did do sleep training, like, as a practiced exercise, like, as
Mhm.
a like a plan, um, he it's almost like he finally was able to like get that
Yeah.
skill to like get what he actually wanted, which was like
Yes.
full
Yes.
rest independent
Yes.
of anybody else. Yeah. And then
Yes.
yeah, but like with my daughter, I was definitely aware of the concept of drowsy but awake, because you were coaching me through those days, and it was like really wild. Um, but like with a busy house and then much bigger house, like it was uh like those opportunities just weren't really there that much, or like I always wanted to
Mhm.
bring her to a place where it's more quiet, away from like the busy boys. And I do remember that every time that I tried to do that, like it was just never, like she would just cry a lot, and it
Yeah.
was like she didn't want to be put down so much, or
Mhm.
like um I would try to like nurse her and she'd fall asleep, and then like I'd try to burp her and then put her back down, and then like then she'd just be crying and spitting up. So that concept just never stuck for me with her.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah. That's a
um,
good, so you've raised two good points that it might be like depending on the personality of your baby. Like when I think about your middle guy, we hear this a lot. So parents will call us because they want to be actively helping their child to sleep, but the child will not allow it. So they will be like, I'm rocking, I'm patting, I'm shushing, I'm co sleeping, and they hate it. They cry, they cry, they cry. And it's like, well, they're telling you what they want, which is they do not want to be helped to sleep. They do not want that. And that can be really surprising for parents that actually just leaving them alone, they might cry, but they're also crying on you at that time. So if they're crying on you, let them cry off you with assistance, support, all of that stuff. But then let them figure out what they want because it's not you. You're not working.
nope.
So let them, they have something that's so much more powerful internally for them. Now, obviously, that's not every kid, but we hear this a lot. Actually, I get really excited when a client says that, when they're like, oh, nothing works. I'm like, oh, that's good. This means that they're ready.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so wild because even just to this day, like he is our strongest sleeper. He creates, like he's very like our oldest child, he's very adamant about his sleep hygiene and like how
Mm,
his room is set up, and like he's very
hmm.
particular about it. And
Love it.
like our middle
Love
son
it.
can just fall asleep absolutely anywhere. It's like
Yeah.
our older son, he's just so particular in the way, and you could tell like he was almost agitated by being like handled too much. Like he really
Yeah.
needed that downtime, and maybe not so much like in the first like or second month, but even like as far as we remember, like just videos of him too, just watching him, seeing how, oh no, that like he was showed us his personality from the get-go. And
Yeah. Yeah. I think
um,
this is something that new parents don't have, which is the gift of hindsight, is that when I always think back to my kids, they've always been who they've
they
been from
are,
the
yeah,
very, very beginning. It's not like you've changed them or made them different. It's like, oh no, they've always been this way. They've
yeah.
always been who they are. Um, I want to talk about, and you reminded me this before we recorded, Lisa, when you were talking about, I was like, hey, I want to talk about Drowsy But Awake. And you're like, oh, maybe parents are missing cues too, which is a really good point. And I want to talk about some of those things, especially for a newborn,
Mhm.
because parents will often say, I don't see any drowsy. It's awake and screaming at my face. So I understand that. But their newborns are kind of subtle. They're far more subtle. And when we're thinking about drowsy, we think about yawning, rubbing eyes, very demonstrative ways of showing sleepiness or tiredness. But newborns aren't necessarily like that. I'd love to talk about my first because she was so interesting in how she showed her drowsiness. Now, again, I was a person that read everything prior to my child's coming. So I was really ready. And I was aware that drowsy might not look like those big, obvious signs. My daughter's sign was a faraway stare. So we would just be like la la la, in the zone. She'd be really active. She'd be looking around. She'd be really engaged in her surroundings. And then all of a sudden, she would just kind of get a look. I'd wrap that baby up and I'd put her down. I did not wait until she was crying. I did not wait until she was yawning, because for a newborn, that can actually mean that we've like gone past the point
Yes.
of no return and that protest is coming next. I always tell my clients as well that putting their babies down when they are happy and not waiting until they are sad. And the reason is, if your baby's already crying and upset, they need comfort. They don't need to be put down
Yes.
independently. So you put them down and they're like, what the hell? I want to cuddle. What's happening? I'm freaking out. What you want to do is you want to get them when they're happy. So my daughter would get this faraway stare. She'd be content. I would do all that I could to kind of, wrap her up, put her down. I put her down and she'd sleep like a dream. Like literally people would be like, how did you do that?
Mm-hmm. I remember saying that to you.
I know. I remember I've told this story as well, where we were interviewing for a nanny, and because I went back to work early, so my daughter was like under 4 months, so she was like three and a half months at the time.
Yeah.
And so I was starting work in a month. We're interviewing this nanny, and I just said, "Oh yeah, she needs to go for a nap." So I just walked upstairs, and she's like, "Oh, is there a better time for me to come back?" And I was like, "No, I'm going to be like 5 minutes." And she's like, what? And so I literally just put her down in her crib, came downstairs, and lived my life.
Yeah.
And it was all that is where Drowsy But Awake was really effective. And because I did that for a really long time, by the time that she was 4 months, she did have the skills to figure out how to do that
Yeah.
work on her own.
Yeah. Yeah. No, for sure. And like those naps that you could just like put them down. Like for me, that was my bedtime flex, being able to put
Mm,
my kid down in under 15 minutes when I had
mm-hmm.
company. I'd
Mm-hmm.
always be like, put my kid down, come down. Like I don't hear all the applause for
Where's
for
my
me coming right back down to
100%?
show off my amazing bedtime skills. Yeah. That is just like the naps or the bedtime thing of just being able to make it like this, and
Yeah.
then it's all done. I just remember like that saved my
Yeah.
social life when
Yes.
I had newborn, right? Or like small
Totally.
baby. It's like just come to
Well,
me, and then
and
and we can
then
facilitate a party while the baby's sleeping.
that's a really good, I mean, that's another great tip. If you want a social life, invite people to you. That's easy.
Yeah.
Um, I also think that, going back to the Drowsy But Awake thing, let's say you're just not, you're not getting what those cues are. Maybe they're changing day to day. One of the other tips that I tell my clients is start keeping a journal. If you've got the time, if you care, keep a journal about how things have gone. So let's say you have a 2 month old and you're trying to put them down at a 1.5 hour wake window. Write down what the outcome of that was. Was there protest? What was their behavior before? What did it look like? How long did it take them to get them down? How long did they sleep? Then you're going to keep that journal or, spreadsheet, however hardcore you want to get into. And I'd like you to start noticing patterns of behavior. Maybe the next day you try, 1 hour and 15 minutes. Maybe the next day you try 1 hour and 45. It's an experimentation on your individual baby. Okay. This is really clear. This is a point of something that I guess I just really want people to kind of hold on to, because, all of this shit on the internet is helpful. Like I have this stuff on the internet. It's a starting point. It is not gospel. So if you are really trying to stick to wake windows because some blogger that you really enjoy said it worked for her baby, it might not be working for your baby, because that is your baby. Your baby
Right.
might need something totally different. So start there. Don't stress over it, right? The more you stress, the more your baby's going to feel that. Do what you can. Really, you can't. If you did absolutely nothing with your baby until you're ready to make those changes, nothing bad is going to happen until it's bad for you. Nothing bad will happen to your baby. So my answer to my follower is, what happens if my baby did not come with the drowsy but awake setting? They might not be showing those cues, but they definitely do have drowsy but awake. Drowsy but awake after 3.5 months may not be appropriate anymore. It's probably, you're looking at more active strategies, probably more sleep training. And that is going to really help. Try putting your baby down awake. And there's nothing wrong with your baby. They are who they are. And that's what I'll say to that.
Yeah. No, those are great points.
Thanks.
That made sense.
Any final thoughts, comments, concerns?
Yeah, I think give yourself some slack and in understanding that not all people fall asleep the same. You know, they're made the way that they are. Each person is their own individual self, and like you always say, you know, it's not a problem unless it's a real problem. And if you're making it work, then. But yeah, the drowsy and awake thing is a real thing. I love that your oldest just stared out into the distance.
So she did. She was just, it'd be like, la da da. I'd be like, all right, it's time. I know, a faraway stare. Who knows what she was thinking about? Now, oh gosh, now.
Get me to bed, bitch.
Pretty much. Well, now she's like, I can't go. She cannot fall asleep without reading. She can't. It can be like, I mean, I'm not, I know. She can't fall asleep without writing a full Nobel Peace doctorate.
Oh,
you know? You know when that happens?
She can live here. I can't get my oldest to start, like, to be in love with reading. Like, he just doesn't like it. Like, we try it all. He just hates it. He hates reading. He'll do anything. He'll do 85 flips.
My teacher brain says, so we got our daughter into reading through graphic novels, which she loves. I also think the other thing that you should consider is audiobooks. It activates the same part of his brain and he can do other things. So if he really wants to be active and do 100 flips, he can do that and read a book.
Yeah, you know, for him, it's almost like if a book was strapped to his face while he was doing exercise.
Yeah.
Right. But my point with him reading visually is because I want his grammar to improve.
Yeah.
And anyways, that's another podcast.
We will do a podcast on grammar.
He writes the same as my 4-year-old, honestly.
Almost. He'll get there.
Yeah.
Everyone's on their own timeline.
Exactly. All right.
All right. Well, as always, everyone, you can find out more at babiesbestsleep.com/blog. We have a whole blog, Babies Best Sleep, on Instagram and TikTok, where I talk and talk and talk. What else do I have? I have this podcast, but you're here. There's so many options. If you head into my Instagram and go into the link in bio, we also have a whole bunch of freebies to send out. We also do quarterly workshops that are free that can have you one-on-one asking your own individual questions with a sleep consultant. That's free. We do that quarterly. That's our outreach program. We really want to do that and continue giving back to our community. So if you want more information on that, you can head to babiesbestsleep.com, sign up for our newsletter, and make sure that you are first on the list. And we don't really spam people. I send a monthly newsletter. I'm not going to bug you. I'm not going to mess up with your life. But I do sell things online for a living. So please make sure that you are adding us to your safe list if you do subscribe. Because then people will sign up and be like, I never get your newsletter. Am I even getting anything? And I'm like, check your spam. And there I am, all alone in your spam folder. All right. Have a good one, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Bye.